Last question from Uncle Steve, and we're just gonna go through these questions until we're done. And you know, we're already almost an hour in. So, difference between religion and spirituality, David. Well, that's a deep, maybe not so deep question.
Yeah, it depends on the angle you take to it. I mean, religion is a word that can encompass a whole lot of different meanings. It can be as simple as a religion can be as simple as something like a belief system, you know? So under that, I mean, under that definition, religion is just simply a word to describe people's belief systems. And so there's not really a difference between that and spirituality in any sense. Other than if you're trying to delineate between materialistic belief systems with that nonetheless venture into religious territory versus religious belief systems that incorporate the supernatural. I mean, but then of course you have the idea of religion as a set of rules that you have to live by.
That's what I was going to bring up. Yeah.
And that's, I wouldn't really contrast that definition of religion with the word spirituality anyway, because to me, spirituality is a word that it just means whatever people want it to mean at this point, I think. So if I was looking for something to contrast with the idea of religion as a set of rules that you have to follow so that you can be considered a good person. If I was going to contrast that with something, I would say the answer is Jesus.
Yeah.
It sounds like the easy answer, but that's the answer. Because most belief systems that humans have, especially the ones that involve deities and afterlives and all that, focus around the idea of a sort of transactional relationship between humans and the gods or goddesses that they serve, in that there's things you do or rules you have to follow or what have you, and you check off these boxes so that you can be accepted by your deity that you follow, or you can get the desired outcome in the model of afterlife that you subscribe to. And I think the way of Jesus stands alone in that there's no boxes to check off. That Jesus checked off all the boxes, and all it comes down to is truly accepting the finished work of the cross, which easy to say, much harder to do. But nevertheless, that I feel like that's the big difference there between what you might call religion and the way of Jesus. In religion, man checks off his boxes and, goes to his deity and says, "Look at what I did. Will you accept me now?" And
I found myself. Can you accept me now?
in Christianity, or in the way, in the way that, in the way of Jesus, Jesus is the one who checked off all the boxes, and our only role is to accept that free gift. So that'd be my take on the thing.
I think you said it very more succinctly than I could. I think Jesus is the answer, absolutely. But the difference between religion and spirituality, I feel like that's interesting because I remember I took a class with a guy and I kind of looked up to this guy in a certain way. He might not have made all the right choices in his life. You know, he might have had a divorce and he sees his kid every once in a while, but he was generally a really down to earth guy. Wasn't spiritual, wasn't a Christian, nothing like that. But he loved his dog, loved his kid, even loved his ex-wife. And he went on, found new careers from a mechanic over to an IT guy. And really interesting fella, really cool. Went by the name of Matt. And I remember thinking about his life, and he didn't have a church or anything, or did he really need one? Who does to say? But I feel like Jesus is the answer, because when you know about intended design of how we are created, and you really understand how we are created and what parts of us correlate, is that the right word? Correlate with Christ? Maybe correlate with Christ? What parts in terms of the mind, body, soul, and spirit kind of work with Christ and how they're activated in a way is what comes to my mind. Because he could have gone off and followed. He was a very morally good fella, I would say. And I think if he had a list, he would check off a lot of those good, morally good things off his list. But what else is there to do? If you have just a checklist of morally good things to do, if your actions depend on your outcome in the end when you die. So just something to throw out there, because when you look at spirituality, when that comes to my mind, it's basically the finding of yourself. A lot of people describe, and not to me personally, but that's what a lot of people associate that with. Like, I went and I found myself. I went soul searching, and I really connected, man, with the crystals, with the with the constellations, or what have you, however you want to do it. I feel like spirituality is more like seeking out yourself and trying to find it, and depending on the good things that you found out about yourself and trying to manifest them in your actions. Versus religion, which is a checklist. And I'm looking at this.
I mean,
no, I'm not almost done. But those, I would say, is how the world views those two words. But when you add Jesus into it and you add the intended design of our souls and spirits specifically, you can, no matter what you do, you will never be able to fill up your spirit with whatever you try to throw into it, whether it be with material goods, good actions, or wasting away in bad actions or things of this world. I think Jesus will surpass, he will surpass all of those and completely bring you to what you're intended to be, which is a relationship with him. So anyway, do you have any thoughts on that?
I was gonna say, you said something.
You're making some funny faces at me.
You said something about, like, you know, people finding themselves as opposed to checking off boxes. I mean, I view that as one and the same. All those new age people, they're checking off boxes too. They're just
and yeah,
they view religion as a smorgasbord. And so they compile their, you know, what they feel are the best bits from each religion, and they build their checklist that way.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, the new age spiritual people are the same thing. They're checking off boxes. They just have a more bespoke
like
list.
Self-implemented.
Yeah, they have a more bespoke checklist.
I think it's interesting you bring that up, because it's like, I think of Buddhists. No offense to Buddhists out there, but it's like,
They suck. No, I'm kidding.
good thing we're not have a tier list of religions, but yeah, Jesus.
I'm just kidding.
But they go and they say, "I found myself."
Do Buddhists say that?
Well,
do you know any Buddhists? Because I don't.
Okay, fine. I admit I don't. But I'm saying, okay, for example, I've seen religions out there that say, "I have found myself. I have centered myself. Can I be accepted now?" And that's really dangerous because when a society says no, what are you going to stand on to kind of fight that feeling off of a rejection? Where does your foundation lie? Because when you self-implement rules that to check off so that your life could be fulfilled or very full of fulfillment, for lack of a better term, that's really dangerous because when you go down that path, it only leads to destruction because you're relying on yourself as a foundation and your own interpretation of life versus the good book, the good instruction book, I should say, that's just sitting right there. So that's all I really have to say about it. I don't know. It's kind of funny, I guess, but once you have that figured out in your life, a lot of things kind of get a little easier to wrap your mind around. Just saying, especially when you establish a relationship with Christ. It's not going to get easier, but it might get a little easier to wrap your mind around some things. Just saying.
Maybe.
Maybe. But I pull from, like, I've been reading a lot of the Book of Enoch recently. And
man, you just won't shut up about the Book of Enoch.
Every time I have my lunch at work, I just read that and just to get away from the screens. But as I'm reading, I'm like, dang, they're talking about the prophecy of Jesus coming back and the resurrection too. And a lot of stuff that John sees in Revelation that they're kind of innuending. That's not a word.
I don't think they are because the Book of Enoch was written pre-Christ.
That's a good point. Okay, well, we can have a discussion about that later. But anyway, that's what I would say, Uncle Steve. Yeah, between religion and spirituality, I feel like sometimes they can be put together one and the same because it's not about religion; it's about relationship. So.
Oh, you said it.
Oh,
you said it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was.
You were not gonna say it.
I was almost gonna say it and then be like.
That was a big oof.
I was gonna have to publicly flagellate myself for
What does flagellate mean, David?
Like whip.
Okay. You using some early 1900s lingo that then died out right then?
No.
Flagellate? Not flatulence?
No. Self-flagellating is a expression for like shaming yourself or
kind of
putting yourself down.
What kind of books have you been reading?
It derives from the medieval.
We don't need to know where it derives from, David. It's a bad word.
It's a good thing. It's a good flagellation is not a bad word. Anyway, it derives from a medieval sect called the Flagellates.
Okay.
They
would whip themselves?
Yeah, they would whip themselves because this was during the plague, the Black Death.
They would whip the death out of them.
No, they would whip themselves.
They would whip the death out of themselves.
No. Bad. Stop it.
Okay, continue.
Essentially, they believed, I don't know how they got to this idea, but they believed that if they went around and whipped themselves, like actual whips, like had little nasty bits in them that would hurt when they hit themselves on the back with them, that God would see their suffering and have mercy and end the plague.
It's a bad word, David. Excuse me. Irrelevant.
Stop. Seriously, stop.
Okay.
I'm not done.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm not done.
Okay.
So they believed that. By whipping themselves, by bringing pain to themselves, that God would see that and He would be moved to compassion, I guess, to heal Europe of the plague that they were suffering. And what it ended up happening, because essentially the belief was common that the plague was like essentially God's judgment on people's sin or what have you.
Okay.
And so what that morphed into was these people going around seeing other people who they thought were, sinners that were causing God's wrath to be poured out on them. And so they started whipping them too. So they went from whipping themselves to going around just basically beating people up that they thought were sinners. And and from that idea of like inflicting pain on yourself with a whip in order to get mercy from God, came the expression of self-flagellation, as in terms of like putting yourself down or like doing something to intentionally humiliate yourself in order to essentially like feel better about yourself. Like, it's kind of like that reverse. It's like that idea of false humility.
Yeah.
Like
okay.
that, if I just really put myself down, people will see how humble I am, and they'll think I'm a good person. So self-flagellation is that idea that you're putting yourself down so that people will think you're really humble, and so you must be a good person as a result.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, the scene in Monty Python and the Holy Grail where the monks chant and then smack themselves on the forehead is making fun of the flagellants.
That's awesome. I was going to say about the flagellants. I wonder if any of them actually got cured of the Black Death because of how much they bled. Like, if you bleed out somebody, sometimes sickness can go away.
Yeah, I would imagine.
I'm going to have Uncle Steve text me that because he's been a long-time nurse for a long time. So let us know, Uncle Steve, if bleeding out can eventually cure you of the Black Death. Anyway, sorry, David. I thought you were going to throw a thesaurus at my head there for a second. So I backed off. So let's move on to the next question.